There is nothing in our lives that is more important than the way that we deal with the ultimate questions and mysteries of human existence. We're born into a world not knowing why. We leave the world not knowing why. And within that parentheses, all of the great questions emerge. Why are we here? Where are we going? What should I do? Who are my people? Why is there evil? What should I do about it? All of these emerge. And the answers that have been given to that throughout history are quite various. And some people assume that because they're various, that they're illegitimate. But how we answer those questions and whether we even dare to raise them determines on who we will be. So I often say that there are two things that determine who we will be: what kind of questions we ask and what kind of questions we refuse to ask. In the whole realm of how we deal with that which is ultimate and mysterious, the ways in which we deal with that most important thing are usually very vague. Very vague. And the language we use, the language of religion and the language of spirituality, are very vague. Somebody once said that let me get it right. When the world began, God, they say, created man. Now, conversely, dancing round the sod, man, they say, created God. Watch your words, or they will do something of the kind to you. The ways in which we are going to characterize ourselves in terms of how we get, whatever answers we get to these ultimate questions are very important. So the first that has been historically used has been religion. Religion has given us the answers to that. And if you look at the stages, all historical religions go through roughly the same kind of stages. In the beginning, somebody, almost always a man, is out in the desert or a mountaintop or on the seas, and he has some revelation about what is ultimately the case that's so overwhelming that he usually becomes very transparent, very ecstatic. And immediately when he begins to talk, whether it's Moses or Jesus or Mohammed, as soon as he begins to talk about this, he begins to gather people to it, gather disciples. Because that energy of enthusiasm, of being filled with the certainty that you have encountered God is so overwhelming, it's like an aphrodisiac. So the disciples begin, that's the second stage. So the first is always the lone person in the desert, facing the universe in terms of his ultimate solitude. Alfred North Whitehead said, religion is what a person does with their solitude. Very interesting, because it means most of us are not very religious because we don't like solitude. Especially in things religious, we want other people to buoy up our beliefs. So that's the first stage and the second stage. The second stage is disciples. And then what do the disciples do? The world over, what they do is they create a lot of stories. They surround the originator of religion with mythic stories. Oh, he was born from a virgin. Oh, he came knowing all the wisdom of the world. Oh, he was born in 5 elephants. Served his mother, whatever it is. So you begin then already to get the mythical and the magical thing going. Third thing that happens is they say, wait a minute, we have this revelation of this prophet, this God-intoxicated man. And we, this group, we agree on that. And how are we now going to make that available to everybody else? So the next thing to do is they begin to formalize a religious doctrine, a creed. They do creed, they do theology, they rationalize the experience. And the next step is, well, who is going to be the protector of the faith? Now we have it. We got the experience, we got the person, we got the mythology, we got the creed. Now, so we, the disciples, have now to become a church. And now we formalize that creed and we become then the protectors of orthodoxy. Following this now, there is another question which really becomes the great demonic question. That is, we have the truth, but what about other people? Are we just going to allow it to the working of the Holy Spirit or to our winsome ways of presenting the faith to convert other people? No. It's much more important than that. So religion then begins to be linked to power. That's what happened with Christianity and with the Roman Empire. It became the religion of the Roman Empire and was enforced then by civil law. Now you notice there are a lot of people in our society right now that want to go back to this. They want to go back to making religion a state religion, have the state protect religion. So when it becomes this, then, and it's linked to power, and the next thing is, I have to force you to believe. I have to force you to believe. And I have to destroy all those who are enemies of belief. So what do you got? You got jihad. Jihad, you've got religious wars, religious hatred, and it's equally Christian, Jewish, and Islamic. We're all equal opportunity haters. We're equal opportunity killers. We are willing to destroy those who believe differently than we. So then, religion becomes then organized religion. And of course, most of the time, most of the quote, civilized world, it has been formal religion that answered people's questions and answered them always in a way that involved a lot of mythology and a lot of authority. Great scene in Dostoevsky where the Christ figure comes back and he confronts the old bishop. And the bishop says, he says to the Christ figure now, he says, no, you don't love people. You pretend to love people. But what you tell people is that they're free. You tell them that they have to make their own relationship to that which is ultimate. You are, in modern words, then he would say you're an existentialist. And he says, the trouble is with people is they're not independent thinkers. And they are children, and they have to be led. And if you really love people, you don't throw the burden of their decisions about these ultimate things, where they're getting the answer. You don't throw that on these poor, weak people. What you do is you give them miracle, mystery, and authority. Okay? And those are the three pillars of all of the major religions: miracle, mystery, and authority. Judaism, you've got all kinds of miracles, but this starts obviously with Moses and Abraham, and they're all there. And you've got the same thing in Islam and in Christianity and all of them. Mormonism, the revelation drops down. So you can't, the message of religion is, you can't do it by yourself. The message of religion is, you don't deal with the ultimate God in terms of faith. You deal with it in terms of having faith in somebody else's faith. Faith of our fathers living still. Now there are other, and there's been a great rebellion now. So the first term then, and the one we really need to get clear about is religion. And so the next is, there are a lot of people now in our ambiance who say, how many times have you heard this? I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Pretty common. I want to ask how many of you are spiritual. And you notice that when people use the word spiritual, it's kind of colored pink. It has that same feeling. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. It's a breathy word. One of the things about spirituality is it doesn't commit you to anything. It commits you to anything. Nothing is demanded. Religion, the word religion from religio, the word is bond and bondage. Religion is about being bonded to another reality. And that bond, and it's the same word, it's the same root as obligation. A religion says you have obligations. This isn't free. You don't just come and get it. There are obligations to go with it. Obligations to live in a certain way. Spirituality doesn't do that. Spirituality is largely a matter of cultivating our own gardens. It's about self-salvation. It's not about a community, largely. It's about me. Now, there's a real way in which spirituality, how we practice spirituality, is alien to what it is that religion says. Whatever else religion says is, it's about we. It's about my people. It's about that. It's about what we do together. And one of the obligations that religion, all three of the major religions talk about, is you have an obligation to perpetuate justice. Book of Micah, what does the Lord require of thee but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God? I've lectured all over the Western world at these growth centers. Esalen was one, all over. Human potential movement. And I noticed a few years ago that they have these wonderful catalogs about getting enlightened and the enlightened body and sexual meditation and all these wonderful things. Not one of them had any kind of offering on justice. Religion always has the demand for justice, that you be an instrument of justice. Spirituality doesn't. Spirituality is concerned with me and my garden. So, those are the alternatives we usually think of. And what I want to suggest tonight is that those aren't the only alternatives. There is living in the presence of the Savior. Now let me play this out just a little bit. Somewhere if I can find it here. The difference between religion and an approach to the sacred is first of all this. Religion begins by telling you the answers. Here are the answers. Here's what you got to believe. Here are the heroes. Here's that. Any kind of approach through living in the sense of the presence of the sacred doesn't start with that. It starts with questions. Quest. The religion is always about the revelation of a known God of some kind. And it also bears on tradition. It says here's the true story. Whereas living in the presence of the sacred is going to be a very, very, very different than that. Let me sort of sum it up in the beginning with a little story. They say that a philosopher is like a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat. Not a bad definition. But a person who believes in one of the historic religions is like a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat that isn't there and finds it. And will give you an exact description of that cat. Now they never produce the cat, but they have the description of it. They say, you know, here, look, everybody else saw the cat. Now here, look, see this book? Look, this book is a cat story. It's a story of all the people who saw the same cat. You know, they describe it the same way. Yeah. Vision. Atheist says, I use the scientific method. Evidence. There is no cat. If there was a cat with all these powers, such a cat would do all kinds of marvelous things, would destroy evil, do all that. I mean, people who believe that there really is a cat there and everything, they say this cat is a cosmic cat, runs the cosmos, is in charge of our life, brings things. This cat, you know, everything that happens is the will of this almighty cat. The atheist, there's no way, no cat there. Things just happen as they happen. The universe is nothing but a bunch of accidental collisions between atoms and molecules that build up to a certain point and where they then, everything explodes, you know, big bang, everything's finally crushed down by gravity to something that's less than a pinprick. And then it explodes in a big bang. And everything comes out of the bang. And if you look at the bang, there ain't no cat there. In fact, if you look at the bang, it's not clear that there was anything before the bang. If it was just another cat. It was just another universe banging up. Now, scientists tells us that we may very well have millions of alternative universes. And that the Big Bang may be nothing except the dying of a former universe. There ain't any God, there ain't any cat. And I know that. Because most atheists are not open-minded, they're anti-cat. Don't believe in no goddamn cat. I was a Methodist, you know, and they talk about the cat, and there is no cat, and I don't like it. And I don't concern myself with goddamn cat. I really don't. I mean, cats is cat no. In other words, most, quote, atheists are really not atheists. They're enemies of a God they don't believe in. I mean, they're very, you notice atheists are always evangelical? I always forget this guy's name. Chris, just died, English. Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens. Brilliant guy. Absolutely brilliant. When it came to an atheist, he was a sawdust tent preacher of atheism. Never seems to occur to atheists that they're just believers turned inside out. Now, one other one, agnostic. An agnostic is someone who blind man in the dark looking for the cat. And he says, I don't know. He says, there can't be a cat. Presbyterian says, I'll tell you what a cat's like. The agnostic says, I don't know. I heard Wendell Berry the other night, and he said, you know, the people who are into spirituality are very much into being enlightened. Light shines, you know, they've reached. They're the cognizant. And he says, I'm an ignorante. I'm an ignorante. Blessed ignorance. Now, these terms are so mushed up that it really is very confusing to us. But one of the things I'm going to do after a while, I'm going to have you go to tables and say, well, where do you fall in this? Or do you fall into something which is a secular mentality? Now, the essence of secularism is it doesn't ask religious questions. It doesn't deny them, it just ignores them. Religious questions aren't the question. The question is, how do we prevent the falling off the fiscal cliff? How do we prevent our enemies getting weapons? Sometimes we go so far as to say, how do we prevent the furtherance of global warming? The problem with that is that's getting very dangerously near a sacred way of looking at things. Somebody who is going to orient their life toward the sacred is not going to say, well, we ought to prevent global warming because it's going to be bad for the culture. That's a secular response, right? Bad for the culture. Sacred response is, we have an obligation to preserve this paradise we have been given. Without our embracing the natural world, then we're cut off from who we really are. Sacred, so I'm going to tell you in a moment, 1 minute story about that you can distinguish between a sacred way of dealing with the world and a secular way. Okay, so the other day I went in the market at 5th Street in Sonoma. And I was in a hurry. And I come to the line, and the checkout girl is just dicking around. And I said, come on, I'm in a hurry, quit dicking around. And then I look at her and I notice that her neck is strained. I notice that her eyes have that kind of almost gray with a little yellow in there that makes something bruised in her personality. Sometimes you see this in people with cancer. And I looked at her and something in me drops. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just feeling pissy today. And she says, yeah, I know what you mean. I have days like that. I've been like that too yesterday, just did. That's all you need to know about the different ways of orienting yourself religiously or in terms of the spirit. Because my first reaction to her is what Martin Buber was saying, that's it. I reduced her to a functionary. I reduced her to a machine that should have been efficiently dealing with me, who's the customer, and it's always right. I robbed her of her humanity. I robbed her of the mystery of her being. I did not relate to it. I did not pause. I did not breathe. I did not take in who she was. Now that's still a long, long way from the death camps, the extermination camps, the Nazis. Same road. Same road. Same road as the jihadis who blow up people, or our government who indiscriminately kills. So, of course, there's only collateral damage. Indiscriminate ignoring of the sacred quality of another life. Or we do the same thing with the quote, environment. Environment is a secular term. It means that this stuff around us is basically here for us to use. And we probably ought to do it a little better than we do. So, because we're getting increasing numbers of respiratory diseases, we should treat the air in that environment in a more efficient way. Versus the sense of the holiness. William Blake, looking at tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye has shaped thy fearful symmetry. You can look at a tiger, guess maybe it's Pi, huh? I don't know, I've seen the movie. Any of you seen it? The Life of Pi? One. Can look and see even that wildness as sacred. All right. So, the difference between secular and sacred emotions. See where I want to go with this. Freud told us that there are all kinds of vices that we have that we don't want to recognize, and so we repress them, we keep them in the unconscious. I keep in the unconscious the knowledge of my cruelty, of the knowledge of the wildest part, my hatred, my sexuality, my rapaciousness, my greed. Those aren't polite emotions. So Freud says, we repress them. We repress them. We don't allow them to come into awareness. Nice people don't. Well, now I will guarantee you, any night on television, you can see everything that nice people don't do. Including cannibalism, and I mean, we have vampires is the least of the thing now. You know, we've got people killing and roasting their mothers in the paper. Didn't make this up, that in the paper this week. We have the most incredible violence. Go in a video store. In a video store, all you see is tits and guns, right? On the movies I'm talking about. I don't mean that, you know, live tits and guns. But you go, every DVD, it's either a gun, and you know, the guns are all, you know, long. You know why women are bad at mathematics, right? They were told that was 6 inches. So these guns are always about 20 inches long, you know. I don't know where they carry them when they're not killing people. And then you've got the women usually being raped. All that stuff that was in the 19th century was underground is now right out there. So now an interesting question comes up. Having drained the unconscious of all of its filth, what's in there now? Well, Freud was so anti-religious that he was unable to consider that it was the sacred emotions that have gone underground in our society. Now I'm here. What does it mean then? What are these sacred emotions? The society programs a lot of emotions into us. So what does our society teach us? What kind of emotions does it recommend to us? What does it recommend? Well, it recommends consuming. It tells us this enormous lie that the more things you have, the happier you'll be. And it also then tells us, you know, the most important measure of our worth, our wealth, is how much money we have and how many toys. Whoever has the most toys when they die wins. It tells us that. And for the most part, we are quite loyal to this religion of consumption. It creeps inside us and we believe it. And I forget who it was in some movie that said, maybe it wasn't a movie, it was, what's his name, who got put in jail, said, well, you know, greed is good. The market wouldn't work without greed. Without greed, Wall Street would be finished in a day. So these emotions, now, and we do know that society is what programs us with emotions of possessiveness. But little kids don't usually have it in the beginning. There are tribes that don't have it. There are tribes where they try to create a surplus in order to have something to give to their neighbor and give to God. So those are emotions. But there are certain emotions that we don't have to be on. And those are the sacred emotions. They're the basis of relating to the world in terms of trying to live in the presence of the sacred rather than in terms of a religious orthodoxy or in terms of a self-salvation or in terms of a secular, well, that is secular. What are they? What I call the elemental emotions. And I had this idea, all you remember high school chemistry? I don't remember anything about it. On the board up there they had a periodic table of the elements. I began to get thinking, I said, you know, I bet there is a periodic table of the elements of the sacred emotions. I bet there's a whole set of emotions that aren't taught to us, but that go with the human condition. And I started, and here's where philosophy helped you. See, philosophy doesn't say start with belief in anything. It says start with wonder. This is the most important thing I'm going to say. Why? You're walking along thinking about the grocery list. And you look out, and all of the leaves in that vineyard next door have fallen. And there's a carpet of red and orange and the most golden thing, a carpet over the entire vineyard that wasn't there yesterday. and you are assaulted by this beauty. Assaulted. And you're assaulted then by the greatest, most unanswerable, most important question a human can ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why should there be leaves? Why should there be beauty? Why should we be able to discern it? Why should we be able to move by it? How can it be that we live in a world of infinite connections, each of which is driven by some different form of intelligence? So the acorn is driven by an intelligence which is going to make it become an oak tree. Not a cocker spaniel. It's always going to become an oak tree. And a squirrel is driven by some kind of intelligence that makes it collect the acorns. And the soil is driven by its own communal intelligence that involves worms and other things. And it's necessary for the tree and necessary for the squirrel. And this is the never-ending story. Why should it be? Why should it be? That is the root of all of the sacred emotions. There are a lot more. From wonder comes gratitude. When you see this infinite world given to you, with the wherewithal to sustain it, I mean, this world was shaped in some way that was prepared for human beings to be here. Prepared for us. A little bit different mixture of oxygen and hydrogen and human be here. It also, however, fills you with anxiety. Here's the place where you're going to be tempted to run back to religion. Pascal said, the infinite spaces fill me with dread. Because as you begin to relate to what is around you in terms of the wonder of it, you also realize you're not charged. And you're not going to get the answers. You can go and be converted by Billy Graham, and one day, a year and 2 days later, you'll slip right out from under and you say, why is there something about that? Gratitude and compassion comes from this. Look at that. Look at the simple root of compassion. I see this checkout girl. I don't have any compassion. And suddenly I say, wait, it is a wonder that this creature exists. I better look, I better take it in. And suddenly I'm in the presence of empathy. I mean, I see this, I know when she's like that, I know what it feels like, but it feels like the same thing in me. And from the empathy comes compassion. We're all in it together. Now, I think maybe I will stop here for a moment and turn you over to yourself. And when we come back, I will talk a little bit more practically about the cultivation of the sense of the sacred. Because you notice in the books that my last book is a book that says, in the absence of God, and it says, living in the presence of the sacred. Well, living in the presence of the sacred also involves a certain discipline. It involves a intricately sculptured way of life. When I was at Harvard at the Divinity School, where we studied theology, one of my colleagues said, we didn't come here to practice religion, we came here to study it. And across the river was Howard Thurman, who was a great black mystic. That's the way it is. I knew where that sentence ended when I started. I forgot it. Come back to me. Howard was a mystic. And I went over to study with him precisely because he had that sense that we never have the answers. And he gave us more and more and more questions. First day we went to class, here's Howard perched like this. And he starts, and he looks at us. He looked at every one of us. Look. That was unusual. Harvard professors didn't look at their students this tall. Then he picked up a book. And the book he picked and started reading. And the book was Admiral Byrd's book, Alone, where he's recounting the experience of being at the North Pole, his fire is creating carbon monoxide. He's 50 below zero out. He says, so if it's 50 below zero out, you're 1,500 miles from anybody else, and you're dying. What would have to have happened in your life for that to be okay? See, that's what I'm asking you. We're all within spitting distance of death. What would the universe have to be? What would it have to be? How would I have to understand it for that to be okay? You know, it's one thing when we're young and healthy and full of piss and vinegar. Then we sort of play fast and loose with the universe. When we get old and we get near the end, and when we sum it up, and we sum up our lives, and we realize some hits, some misses. How am I going to understand what is ultimately the case? In what kind of emotions am I going to reside? And we know a lot about this. Popular music, popular sentiment tells us an ultimate truth in its own sentimental language. There is no answer, but it is only love that allows us to live in the universe with a full heart where there's no answers. It is only love that allows us to die with a sense of fullness. It is only love that patches us into what the hidden intentionality of the universe is. Doesn't give us the answer. Doesn't give us. Matter of fact, to the contrary, the more deeply we love, the less we know about the other person. The more we recognize the mystery of that other person. I'm always surprised by my wife. Thank God. So these elemental emotions, and I've written about them in the Absence of God, which, oh no, I was going to stop there and tell you how to get to them, okay? So why don't we break up in tables here for, 15, 20 minutes. And the question I would like for you to consider is, how do you see yourself? How do you deal with these ultimate questions from what perspective? Origins, where did I come from? Why is there something rather than nothing? What's the purpose of my life? Where do you get an answer to that? What's the meaning? None of us want to go down without having made a difference. What is my vocation? What's my assignment? What am I here to do? Community, who are my people? Who do I belong with? Why is there evil? What will I do about it? Well, you got, say, 15 minutes for a few of you to answer these questions. I've been dealing with them all my life, and I could talk about any one of them for a day, easy. I know, but I'm not going to, so relax. And then we're going to come back and I will talk a little bit about the steps along the sacred journey. And how we get there, how we make this transition from a secular way of dealing with things and people and ourselves to a way of living in a world that we experience as sacred. In a way that we know we're meant to be here. I realize, that in our society, the taboo subjects to talk about, first of all, are money. I'd ask each of you, well, how much are you worth? Oh boy, we wouldn't get much off. And then after money, there is probably, what? Politics? No, sex is way. We talk about that at the drop of a hat. So I need to tell you that in my defense, when they asked me to do this symposium the second time, I said, well, how about I do this thing I do on what's next, about how to think about the future? That's not going to go. It says, too many people, the future is too near. So I just say that the next time, if you invite me back, I'm going to talk about sex after 60, 70, and 80. Okay, tell me anything you found out, or questioned, or want to talk further.
Yeah, we were wondering, where does existentialism fit into your flowchart or your subject?
Existentialism.
Where does existentialism fit into your...
Was that your question?
Yes.
Oh, that's too easy. I am an existentialist. Existentialism, first of all, it covers a wide group of people, all the way from Sartre and Camus and Dostoevsky over to Kierkegaard and Marcel and people like that. I actually wrote my dissertation on Gabriel Marcel, French existentialist. I was sort of deconverted from Christianity by Kierkegaard because I was brought up in a fundamentalist Christian home, and there was a lot. Orthodox Christian theology is pretty fantastic. You have to believe 3 impossible things before breakfast. And when I started reading Kierkegaard, I realized now, here's a person who really thinks in interesting ways. He deals with different points of view, with different characters, he creates pseudonyms and things like that. So existentialism is not, you've got atheist forms of existentialism. Sartre would be that. You've got agnostic forms, which would be Camus, and you have religious forms, which would be Marcel. What they have in common is just this belief that you've got to start from your own existence. So see, I'm a radical existentialist in that way. My first book, well, second book really, To a Dancing God, and then Hymns to an Unknown God, and the last two or three, I actually start with autobiography. I was the one who brought autobiography back into philosophy, saying, look, we don't just start with human beings. I've got to start with my life, with what I as a 20th century person see, how I experience life. So, in that sense, my philosophy begins with my own existence. And one of the things that I used to do seminars a lot with Joseph Campbell. And what got us together was that I had started a movement on personal mythology, where I understood from my own life that I can't believe somebody else's stories and myths. I have to, here, put it this way. Human beings are biomythic animals, okay? In the beginning, we come here with a certain set of hardware. We're hardwired, it's called the DNA. But then somebody starts downloading stories into me. Oh, you're going to be a Christian. Oh, you're going to be a Muslim. Oh, you're a Jew. You're a woman. You're whatever it is. You're a keen. They download those stories, and halfway through my life, I think that's what my story. I think that's who I am. And one day you wake up and says, "Wait a minute, that was my parents' story. That's not my story." At that point, the spiritual or the sacred journey involves my going beyond the myth that was imposed upon me to create an autobiography. And that myth is very vicious. It takes a lot of guts to do it. For instance, what if you, right now, all of you begin to go beyond the myth of American superiority? That'd be hell to pay, man. I mean, it hadn't been many years before, since anybody questioned it was automatically a communist. Could be blacklisted all the time, you know. Who will raise the question of whether the 1 million or 1.5 million killed in Iraq was a just reaction to 3,000 who were killed, not even by somebody in Iraq, but by Osama bin Laden? Say nothing of Vietnam. What were we doing there? I forgot. So when you begin to question those, that's the radical moment in your life where you got to say, wait a minute, what is my life? And you begin to write your own autobiography.
Questions?
You can make counter statements too.
Yes, I would like to ask, why is religion so important here in America?
Why is what?
Religion so important here in America. In Western Europe, you hardly never hear people speak about religion. It might be very personal to them, but it's not something that really is talked much about. Could you answer that? I don't know.
Yeah. America is a frontier country. It's new. We never really went through the Reformation or the Renaissance here. You know, that had happened in Europe when we came over here. And the creation of a state religion and of order wasn't our primary priority. We were going to tame the West. It was the manifest destiny is what we were about. And here were people, we were too busy making a new world to worry about religion very much. And when we did, for the most part, it was a very enthusiastic, you know, it was a great awakening, and it was that kind of very near Billy Graham. We didn't have Episcopalians until we got flush toilets. Not literally true. But more sophisticated. Europe had sophisticated thinkers, and that especially the German universities were almost theological institutes. They had Hegel and all of those people back in the mid 1800s. So Europe had a sophisticated religious scene, philosophical scene. America didn't. The nearest that we ever came early on was Jonathan Edwards and Calvinism. We were too busy, too practical. In some ways, Americans are still too pragmatic to as Americans, what aspect of the life of the sacred don't we do? Well, we're easy. Solitude. We don't do solitude. We don't do silence. We don't do waiting. We don't do any of those things that have been characteristic of the great sacred figures in the past. We don't do them. Yeah, I meditated between, 5 minutes I meditated, yeah.
I'm at a loss here. I can't make much sense out of what you're saying.
Everything or just something?
No, I feel like I'm in the middle of a stream, and the only thing I have purchase on are moss-covered watery stone. Because you put up religion, spirituality, agnosticism, secularism, and sacred. And you gave a concrete example of, I think you did, of your encounter in the grocery store when you became impatient. But could you explain more concretely, or in a definition, less in story, what is sacred to you?
Well, I thought that was just an illustration of an attitude that carries over into other aspects of life. So, like, you want to put it in different terms, Albert Schweitzer talking about reverence for life, that we approach other forms of life with respect, with reverence, with a sense of wonder, that we deal with them as if they had intrinsic value. So, like, now in the ecological movement, there's a whole movement that trees have standing. Do we have an obligation to treat other forms of life in a respectful way? Well, I think that's what the orientation toward the sacred is, that orientation toward another way of being in the world, which is totally incompatible with taking bulldozers and clearing off a mountain and putting the shit in the streams. I mean, so, when you see the contrast, I think it becomes pretty clear. One asks only pragmatic questions. The other asks a very, very different question. What are my obligations toward the other forms of life? Not that those are easy questions to answer, they're not. The question of justice still brings up the question of the use of violence. What's the proper use of violence? How, in a world where you're trying to treat others in a sacred and respectful way, how do you use violence in an appropriate way? I mean, they're heart-rending questions. Did that get you off even one stone or not? Okay, you got another one?
I'll just make a comment if I can. I really enjoyed hearing you speak. But actually, hearing you speak didn't really change my opinion. It asked some good questions, and I was fortunate to sit next to a gentleman. We actually didn't use the crayons, although it was nice that they were there. But what we discovered is that we're both active Christians, and both of us have a belief, different religions, but with the same common goal. And for us, it seemed to be like, and you talked about the sacred, but to me, appreciating the sacred really is part of our religion. And the point that we thought, and it reminded me of Pascal's wager, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Although there's kind of a catch to that, because Pascal made the point that which is better? Given all the choices that you can make, is it better to have a faith in God, or is it better not to? Because finally, you're going to either believe that he does exist, or you're going to believe that he doesn't. So it's going to come down to a belief. So given that then, what kind of choices can you make and which one is the most beneficial to you. So we have the example of the man who leads an exemplary life. He's at Sonoma Village Market. He's frustrated because he wants to get through there quickly. It's not happening, but he sees that the checkout clerk is in distress. So he then realizes that this is happening, and he takes compassion on her, and that's a very sacred moment, and it's good for her, good for him, and on he goes. So as a Christian then, I believe God wants me to be that kind of person. He wants me to have love for other people. I'm a Catholic, so Father Polskamp, Monsignor Polskamp said, it all comes down to love. Really, that's what it's all about. So, but you have to love God, and you have to know that He expects you to. So go back to Pascal then, who says, what's better than, and my wager, and as a Catholic, as a Christian, is that if I love God, and hopefully a much better job of it than what I'm doing, but at least there's a recognition I rely on Him a lot, and He knows that. So we have that kind of relationship. So I'm good to...
You and God have that kind of relationship, or you and Pascal?
Me and God. Pascal, I don't know that well. Actually, it's kind of hard for me to understand. He gets into a lot of math on me. So, if then I die, and here's the guy that was nice to the checkout clerk, and he's a sacred person, but the question came to him that I can either choose to believe in God or I can choose not to. You know, I'm going to go to not believe in God because that's, for whatever reason, more comfortable for me, a more comfortable path for me to proceed. And Christians say, no, for lots of reasons, I'm going to believe in God. So now you passed on, and now you come to a place where you can either be accepted into heaven, should that exist, or not. So the person that accepted the fact that there was God, come on in, you believed in me, did all the things that I asked you to do, you've done better, but you're not bad. So, and you helped out the checkout clerk, and you did a lot of things. Here's the guy that was the sacred guy, but didn't make that step, or she didn't, to actually believe in God. Comes up there, you didn't do the one thing that I really wanted you to do. You didn't believe in me, you didn't trust me, you didn't love me. I'm sorry. So as a Christian, that's the claim, that's the state, that's the path I'm taking. If I don't take it, I think it's good for me. If in fact, when I do die, and it turns out there is no God, I still live it. I still live a good life. At least that's one of the things. So it's not a question for you, but I would like to hear your response to it.
My response is that it's way, way, way too literalistic and mythic, and that kind of God who I come up there having done all these good works, I'm sorry, you didn't confess Jesus. I've got better morals than that God. I won't take my ticket into those conditions. Now, Christianity, but you're presenting one form of Christianity. Christianity, more than Judaism or Islam, has a very progressive wing, and it has a more traditional wing. The traditional wing is literalistic. And I think, see, I would say you're using symbols as if they were literal. And you create this kind of drama where there's a heaven, and there's a God, and you talk God and all that. A progressive Christian would say, we start with the fact that all religious language is highly metaphorical. That it is a metaphor, and you gotta watch what your metaphors do, because see that when you don't translate that metaphor, that's an exclusivism. That's casts all the people who don't believe in your way into hell. They can't get into heaven. They didn't get a ticket to ride. Well, right from the beginning, when I was a kid, I remember, because that's what I was brought up to believe, you know. My mother said, doesn't matter if they're good, you know, they're on the wrong highway, and they're good, and they're humanistic. And right from the beginning, I just found that terrible. And it ate at my gut, because I said, if this is true, and I was supposed to be a Christian, and then I was sincere about it. I mean, I knew the Westminster Confession and all that stuff. If that's true, I can't believe in that God. I will not take my ticket to ride under those conditions. That's tyrannical. Because it's making some kind of a statement, which is a Santa Claus God, I just can't. Now, to me, As I said, I was in Kenya, I don't know where I said this, I was in Kenya last year and visiting the Church World Service Project, and where they're rescuing young girls from having no education there, bringing water into the villages. And that's the other side of Christianity, where we realize that stories, these are stories. The Bible is not to be counted like the Word of God. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, because fundamentally that's intellectually dishonest. We know how this document was created. We know by whom. We know the redactions. We know the differences. We know how the four Gospels came into being, and we know the relationship with Paul, and we know who's Jerusalem doing a power play against Rome and all those things. I just think that, to me, I was brought up within Christianity, and those values and that basic view about the world is still mine. But I'm going to take all those stories as metaphors, as just so stories. Thinking about the unthinkable, you have to use stories. See, Plato did that himself. When Plato got down to the end, he told the story of the myth of the cave, because that was the only way he could talk about the importance of seeing, of enlightenment. So, I can't go with you on that.
What is the path to the sacred?
Somebody asked Buddha that, if he called it enlightenment, what's the path to enlightenment? And the Buddha said, pay attention. He said, wait a minute, come on, give me more. Pay attention. Third time, pay attention. The difference between a religious approach is, in a religious approach, first place, the metaphor is always of a pilgrimage. You're here and you're going to an end, okay? In the sacred, there's no place to go. You're here. It's here. It's now. You're surrounded by it. You're surrounded. How did Tillich put it? Tillich and Buber both said the same thing here, sort of like, every living entity is a voice calling to you to respect it. So there's no place to go. You don't have to go anyplace. You just have to pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention.
Questions? No, we're going to stay here. Was there somebody with a hand up? What did I say? Okay.
I have a question.
And back there?
Here, hold on for a minute.
Sam, you're quite dismissive of atheism.
I was dismissive of atheists?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, it came across that way to me. But assuming that atheism is the belief that there is no God, then if you're not an atheist, does that mean that you believe or hold out the possibility that there is a God? And so if you're not an atheist, what kind of God do you believe in?
Well, I don't go from atheism to a statement of what kind of a God. I don't go to atheism at all. I always say I don't know enough to be an atheist. I start with an agnostic position. And the question becomes, well, if I'm going to use the word God, what does that include? What do I mean by that? And obviously I can't go to some authoritarian source and say, well, I mean what it says in the New Testament, because that's cheating. I'm using an authority to do that. So I would myself go to the immense, I would go first of all, see to the experience of wonder, the experience of the immense creativity, the unimaginable creativity of the world in which we live. So, My friend Bill Jersey just did a movie on fractals. And when you see the fractal structure of things, life is so inventive. And whatever it is that has been the force that drives all of these different forms to evolving some forms of consciousness that allow the world to become this intricate weaving of a multiplicity of beings. I'm willing to call that God. I'm willing to say that's part of what I mean by the word God if I use it. But my last book, just have it there for sale, and they make good presents. I say in there, I always say G dash dash. I agree with the Jewish principles saying, they would use the name of God once a year at most. We use that word way, way, way too much. I'm going to try not to use it. I'm going to try to say what I have to say about that way of being in the world without using the word God too much, because it makes a noun out of what is certainly a process. I mean, I was blown away. I keep saying, 2 nights ago I saw this thing about the universe, the Big Bang, and how now they're thinking there may be billions of alternative universes. And that, every galaxy has its own black hole. And, what is a black hole except a resurrection machine? Everything sucks in there, and pretty soon you know that everything expands, boom, it goes out. And it is not a metaphor to say that you are created out of stuff that was in the stars. The carbon, and especially carbon, which came from an exploding star, that's what's allowing me to think. Well, I tried to put myself in that vastness, even to think about the idea of God. And then what I try to do in the book and say is, now given my inability to conceive of that, now I will use a lot of different metaphors. I have a whole list of things, from the self-surpassing surpasser of all to the central casting, cosmic central casting, anything that is an intuition that leans in the direction of God. I try to create a metaphor, and those metaphors help me to think. They help me to think in a it's as if way, in a narrative way, in a metaphorical way. But that's very important to me in terms of my understanding of how I position myself in life.
So does living in the sacred require one to have a community?
That's a very good question. Does living in the sacred, yeah. It's not that it requires you have a community so much as that you look out and find you are in a community. That you are not. The last thing you are is an individual. The D.T. Stokes used to say, we spend 98 times thinking about the self, and there is no self. Our great heresy is that we believe we're individuals. And so what's it's done, it's made us a very lonely people. Made us a people that we don't do community well. The real truth is we are in a community. If I'm aware of what's on, I'm aware that tree out there is a part of my lungs. If I cut it down, I'm not going to get oxygen. So it's more that we realize that we are communal. We're communal by nature. Community is not something added to us. It's something out of which we arise. The Carson McCullers, remember the wedding, the older sister's getting married and the young sister says, but now, who will be the we of I? Who's the we of I?
I consider myself an atheist, and I do that because, as I view the laws of physics and chemistry and biology, I don't see the need for some kind of power outside that picture. Nonetheless, I feel that I live in your sense of the word sacred, I feel I live in a very sacred world and have a sacred responsibility in relationship to my fellow man. Am I off base?
Not in the second part. Just remember, the laws of nature tell us nothing.
That's right.
One person put it this way, says, well, tell me, was the world there first or the laws first? Did the law come first or not? And then Wittgenstein says, people begin to talk about the laws of nature like they used to talk about the old deist God. And all the laws of nature are certain observations of regularity, punctuated by the refusal to observe those things that don't fit into the regularity, which create the next paradigm. So science is not in the business of trying to understand the meaning of everything. It can't do it. That's not its business. It's an empirical matter. And you're absolutely right. You can be completely submerged in that and still live in terms of the sacred. As a matter of fact, I think the best scientists, almost all of them I know, have that sense. Have a sense of the sacred.
Sam, we'd like to thank you for another great presentation.
You got one more question?
One more?
The way I was raised and my interpretation, because I'm not religious, I feel that the way I was told all throughout history, man, whoever wins the war gets the right to history, gets the right to story. And we're made in God's image. God is all good, pure, and wonderful. And you bring up Christianity, Muslim, and Jew. If God is all good, pure, and wonderful, and we're made in His image, why do we repeatedly always have death and negativity with God attached to it? Those are the issues I have problems with religion. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not clear. Go on.
Well, we're made in His image. Everything is good. We pray to Him. We pray for goodness. But all we have is evil. This battle of the religions. My God is better than your God. And all we do is kill. When does that whole cycle, if someone believes in the goodness of God, when does it stop if He's all good? Why would He put us on this earth to have this hatred towards one another?
See, one thing I try to do is I try not to jump up to heaven and do psychodrama or theodrama. I mean, God is everything. They don't do it that way. Do you know why, among other things, I believe in the sacredness of life? Because of the death camps. Because when I see those death camps, something in me says, God damn it, no. And that's the point where we are created in the image of God, and you are obliged to respect us and respect them. See, that's where it comes out of in my gut. That's the existentialist, see? Coming out of that. Not jumping up here, well, there's evil and God's all, if God is all powerful, He can't be all good because there is and they're evil. See, that's the way of jumping up and do that. I'm an existentialist. I'm trying to stay here and live here with a problem. I'm trying to, and I do have to identify evil. And I do have to take some stand where I do something to lessen the quantity of evil in this world. Now see, that's the existentialist position. That's coming from where all of these things make a demand on me. They're not theoretical. They're not theoretical.
Sam, thank you for coming tonight. I want to let you know that our wonderful Donna is in the back. If you'd like to purchase any books or tape, they're back there. Donna is going to help you. And again, thank you so much for coming, Sam. And we'd like to see you all again on Sunday at the Symposium 10:30 at East Fresh. Thank you.